Hello again and welcome to this week's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. A rather unusual week because both Max and Greg are away on special assignment, which in broadcasting language means they're on vacation, but I'll be joined a little bit later by Kristen Decker here at the desk. Meanwhile, this week I had the opportunity to fly Air Orion to Redwood Falls, Minnesota and Farmfest, a show I hadn't visited for several years. So I asked farm broadcaster Lynn Kettleson to bring us up to date on the history.
It started Orion in 1976, and it was actually a national event at the time. Glenn Campbell, Loretta Lynn, the Oak Ridge Boys, Statler Brothers were all there. It was a musical farm show, and it got back into its roots of being an ag show, but it's been many, many years. It's moved to 3 different locations, but it's pretty well settled here now in Redwood County.
So let's talk about the site because it has some history.
It does. This is the Gilfillan estate, and really it's dedicated to preserving a family farm, the Gilfillan farm, and they really specialize in older equipment. Orion, you're very familiar with the collectors and how people love that. If you go right next door, that's what you'll find going on right now. So the site was expanded and paved, and Farmfest came here about 10 years ago, and it's been very successful.
And it has a new owner.
It does. American Farm Bureau Federation bought it, and actually it's interesting because it still does not have the feel of a Farm Bureau show. It's a general farm show, and so they've really handled it quite well. All groups are represented here, all have equal access.
You do bring an interesting program of panels, however, that we don't find at a lot of the other farm shows.
You know, most farm shows don't get people for panels like they do here.
Yeah.
The political forums are always completely full of people. They like controversy in Minnesota. I think that dates back to the Hubert Humphrey days.
Yes. Farmers
Have always been engaged in politics here.
I do want to thank Lynn for his efforts in having Governor Mark Dayton of Minnesota proclaim the day Orion Samuelson in the state. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Lynn. Flying over the fields of Minnesota, crops look very good, and that was echoed by Kevin Papp, who is the president of the Minnesota Farm Bureau.
You know, Minnesota, we kind of are feeling a little bit that this year is our turn, but yet it's not in the bin yet, but we've had a very good year so far.
So talk to me about the mood of Minnesota farmers as we move toward, well, maybe some legislation from Washington, maybe not.
Well, the mood is always good in agriculture. You have to be optimistic to be in agriculture. Certainly there's some ups and downs. We understand that. Minnesota, we've had some real issues with the H5N2. And so many of our members, many parts of the state, almost 9 million birds have been affected. And it's been not only a financial stress, but also an emotional stress for those folks.
A lot of people don't really think about the emotion part of it, but for a farmer, it's tough.
You know, it was best described to me as living in a tornado warning. You know the tornadoes are down, you know that they're doing damage, but you don't know if you're going to be next. And you don't really know, those growers, you don't know until you open that door that morning if it's your turn. And it's such an emotional toll as well as the financial.
The president of the Minnesota Farm Bureau, Kevin Papp. Bev Durgan is Director of Extension for the University of Minnesota, and she and members of her staff have been deeply involved in the bird flu situation affecting Minnesota turkey growers.
We have faculty that work on the production issues, but we've also seen, as Kevin Papp just said, is that the emotional issues on the farmers themselves, but also on the communities. So we have, it has impacted people that are working in those facilities. It's also the packing plants, and so Extension has been working with those groups too to really work on this whole stress and the financial impact. And one of our Extension faculty did an economic impact, and we're well over $600 million in economic impact from just this spring. So it's been a big impact on Minnesota.
So can you describe for me where we are now from the standpoint of getting it out of the way and cleaning it up and restocking?
So we are a month now with no detects on farms. So we're hoping, again, this warmer weather that has decreased the transmission of the influenza. And now many of those barns are being restocked, and there's been some delay because this has also affected the laying hens, so both the chickens and the turkeys, and so to get the eggs up and going, that has been some delay. And now we're just really trying to prepare the growers and others to see, as we see the migration of the waterfowl, are we going to see another issue this fall? And so, we continue to work on that. We're partnering with the USDA to look at, a vaccine for this, but it really is a lot of unknowns, and that's the most stress, is that you don't know. You can maybe prepare, and think about it, but you really don't know what the impact is because we haven't been through this kind of situation before.